Chair,
Okay, thank you.
on Afghanistan.
We're going to Senator Ludlam first. Senator Ludlam, your call.
Thanks, Chair. I've got some on Afghanistan as well. Just seek your advice as to whether to go to those now, because I was going to go back to the white paper. Do you have? Yeah. Okay, we'll stay there.
That's all right.
And mine are fairly brief, as I understand others have canvassed this in a bit of detail. And if this is already on the transcript, then I'll just go and check it. But I'm interested to know what you're able to tell us about the remaining SOTG contingent, where they'll be based, how they will be supported, and how long they're likely to be there.
It hasn't changed since last time we've discussed, and it was a brief part of the statement this morning. Government hasn't made any final commitment to whether the SOTG will remain or not, and that will be based on discussions that are currently going on in Brussels over the next couple of days on the future post-2014 operations in Afghanistan. It'll also depend on a mandate, the legal coverage for the SOTG to be able to operate. So there's still no commitment one way or the other, or decision one way or the other on SOTG at the moment, other than what's previously been stated.
The mandate, that's an ISAF question.
Is there a need? And then will that fit our national objectives as well in Afghanistan? And then whether there would be any level of legal coverage for operations for the SOTG post-2014?
You say if, as though it might be in question as to whether there's such a need? Well,
as we discussed before, in fact, before you came in, the discussions currently going on at NATO headquarters in Brussels is determining or helping set out what the post-2014 requirement for a post-ISAF mission will be, and that will be one of the factors that will take into account whether we have SOTG involvement or not.
Okay. Now, we're effectively pulling the Tarancot installation apart. That's where they're based at the moment.
They're currently based at multinational-based Tarancot.
Yeah.
We're not pulling it all apart. We are gifting Camp Russell and some of Camp Holland to Afghan National Security Forces.
Okay. And I would understand that will have been canvassed in a fair bit of detail this morning, the arrangements for...
We've talked a little bit about it just before lunch.
Okay. Is it likely that the Special Operations Task Group would remain where they are, or would they be moved to Kandahar? Would they?
No,
are these things all in
won't
question?
remain in their current location.
No.
No, not after at the end of this year.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to work out exactly, and Senator Finney, you might have to step in if it's a policy question. Has the Australian government decided whether or not they're staying, or is it that the Australian government has decided they're staying and it's just a question of what their role is and where they're based from?
In fact, this matter has been canvassed a little bit. I'm happy to go over it again, Senator. The government has indicated that it's willing to consider any request, but it has gone no further than that, and there are several, I guess, to borrow the Secretary's phrase, moving parts before that decision comes to government. I guess in terms of the SOTG contingent, I think the only thing we can say with certainty is that it will not be at TK. But as to whether the contingent is required and as to whether it's in Kandahar or Kabul or somewhere else, those decisions are still some way down the track. We do not know the footprint of coalition forces that will be in Afghanistan post-2014. The United States and other coalition partners has not yet reached a concluded view about any of those matters. And so all of those decisions are still a little way down the road.
Okay. The process will be, though, some kind of proposition might come back from Brussels from the meetings that are afoot at the moment that'll be considered by the government and announced at some stage.
There is unlikely to be a specific proposal specifically directed at Australia out of Brussels.
Okay. So on what basis will the Australian government be making a decision about our continued deployment?
Well, it will be on the basis of one, what different coalition partners are doing. Secondly, and of course most importantly, is of course what the Afghan government may want.
Yeah.
And thirdly, the mandate or the legal framework within which special forces may be there after the end of 2014.
Okay. All right. What is your understanding of the present disposition of the Afghan government towards continued deployment of Australian Special Forces troops in Afghanistan?
I don't think the Afghan government has made any public comments in respect of that. Senator, I think it's still relatively early days, and their focus, I think, has been very much in the context of their discussions, one with the United States and secondly with the broader coalition.
Okay, thank you. What are you able to tell us, so as far commenced as the handover at Tarin Kot is, there's a certain amount of toxic materials and waste and material that's been stockpiled there over a long period of time, not including the munitions. Can you just describe for us how that is to occur and what proportion of that sort of material are we likely to leave behind?
I'll get Commander Joint Logistics to come in and give you a brief in detail on that specific area if you like. But we are bound by our legal requirements here to be able to remove a lot of the equipment and anything that we may have taken into the country, and we've just got to remediate the land. We have to go through all that. But if Commander Joint Logistics be able to give it to you now, or
might as well have it now, and then I'll hand over to the chair.
Senator Redmond Clint Thomas, Commander Joint Logistics. As the VCDF has alluded to, we apply the environmental protocols in accordance with our own is what we absolutely endeavour to apply, and so the whole disposal mechanisms that have been set up in the Middle East really have that in mind, and so as I was alluding to before lunch, there's a whole range of options that apply if there's disposal. If it's returned to Australia, obviously that's not an issue because we then bring it back home and we will dispose of using our own Australian-based protocols for disposals.
You've got some quarantine matters to take into account.
Correct. So, for example, I have an arrangement with my equivalent in the NATO support agency, Mr. Mike Lydon, who has set up through the NATO arrangements a range of contracts which apply to all NATO countries and countries in support of NATO operations, such that if we cycle disposal of various types through the contracts set up, they're all compliant in accordance with the international protocols. So that's, for example, there's small arms shell casings, for example, are taken to a particular installation and shredded in accordance with international protocols, as one example.
All right, so the summary there is we're not unilaterally disposing the stuff according to our own protocols. We'll batch up our material with that coming out from other NATO partners. Is that the general summary?
Correct, Senator. Yes, it's the disposals planning is as detailed as the repatriation of serviceable equipment.
Yeah.
And very mindful of international protocols and our own at home as well.
What's going to happen to 10 or 12 years worth of sewage at the TK base?
We
won't be bringing that home, Senator.
I don't have an answer for that.
You don't have an answer?
My answer was in the guise of equipment.
No, that was what I put to you initially. But it's a serious question I ask you. If you don't have a brief, I can't believe you wouldn't have a brief in front of you on that. But if you're able to take on notice what the final disposal, I mean, this is in an agricultural valley. We can't just leave it lying there.
No, we'll take that on notice.